say you wanna watch a drama. You say you wanna watch a comedy. Well, you can watch it with your mama, or you can watch it with your daddy. You'll even sit and watch it with your middle schooler, so you can come and talk around a water cooler. We're watching all day and all night. Couch potatoes unite. Whoa, whoa. Couch potatoes unite. Whoa, whoa. Couch potatoes unite.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! Which is based on a blog of the same name because we're not trying to hide our super secret spy shenanigans and therefore don't need an alias. It's as simple as that. My name is Kylie and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and or checking out our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, as you're bound to find some common ground or something you like. For at Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and the unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. CPU! Hopes you've been following releases of brand new episodes of the podcast on Wednesdays, as well as new blog entries on some Tuesdays, and as always, we have several more new episodes on the way. Because the panelists and I live lives behind our podcast, the episodes are published once per week. Subscribe to the blog or the podcast via iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and via Google Play to stay on top of brand new episodes. Episodes already published discuss a variety of shows around the water cooler, including, but not limited to, The Crown, Once Upon a Time, A Series of Unfortunate Events, Fuller House, Westworld, American Horror Story, The Good Place, Grace and Frankie, Supernatural, Arrested Development, Jane the Virgin, and the various shows in the Arrowverse on the CW. We've published several episodes in our Looking Back series covering such diverse shows as Reign, Friends, Sense8, Battle Creek, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. Plus new episodes are in the works, including revisits for Doctor Who, Gotham, Schitt's Creek, Game of Thrones, Stranger Things, iZombie, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Orange is the New Black, 13 Reasons Why, and the Marvel's Defenders panel will talk Season 2 of The Punisher. We'll be launching new panels covering Riverdale, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Altered Carbon, Mr. Robot, Charmed, Outlander, and the Breaking Bad universe. And because we look back at shows now past, we'll take a smallish look back at a short-term show from some kind of yesteryear, namely Freaks and Geeks. We'll don witch hats and bring our Salem cats for Sabrina the Teenage Witch. We'll put out some musical stops for our crazy ex-girlfriend, and we'll revisit one of the all-time and most watched classic sitcoms, MASH, which is very popularly requested for some reason. By the way, did you know that CPU also from time to time goes live? We've been live from bunkers and comedy shows and Comic-Cons, and we just went live from Blue Bridge Games to take a shiny look back at Firefly. Plus, we're planning more live appearances and other cool stuff. So make sure you like or follow us at our Facebook page, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, or subscribe to the blog, our YouTube channel, our iTunes channel, our Stitcher Radio channel, or find us on Google Play. In the meantime, if you don't hear a show in this podcast format, fellow panelists and I still write reviews, and we always seek new panelists. So if you have any interest in joining the discussion, say hello by finding us at any of those outlets I've mentioned. At the very least, stop by and leave us a thumbs up, comment, or review. We like feedback! Just keep your spy hitmen at bay. The Cold War is so passé. Or maybe it's not. Today's panel is looking back at an American period spy thriller television series created by Joe Weisberg for the FX television network, which aired on that network for 6 seasons from 2013 to 2018. If you aren't already aware, from time to time, CPU will be choosing shows of all types, but usually of some fame or notoriety to reminisce about, and to consider whether or not they age gracefully like Elizabeth and Philip Jennings as presumed American citizens, or don't hold up as well like Nadezhda and Mikhail's homeland, the USSR. As such, this is another chapter of our Looking Back podcast episodes wherein we review a show that has been gone, either via natural end or cancellation, for some time, and today, that show is The Americans. Set in the 1980s during the Cold War, The Americans tells the story of Elizabeth, played by Kerry Russell, and Philip Jennings, played by Matthew Rhys, 2 Soviet KGB officers posing as an American married couple living in Falls Church, a Virginian suburb of Washington, D.C., with their children Paige, played by Holly Taylor, and Henry, played by Kedrick Salati. Their neighbor Stan Beeman, played by Noah Emmerich, is an FBI agent working in counterintelligence. Season 1 begins shortly after the inauguration of President Ronald Reagan in January 1981. Season 6 ends in December 1987, shortly before the leaders of the United States and the Soviet Union signed the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. The Americans premiered in the United States on January 13, 2013, and ended on May 30, 2018. Over the course of its run, the series was considered among the best of its era by critics, winning 2 Peabody Awards, 5 Television Critics Association Awards, and 2 Critics' Choice Television Awards for Best Drama Series. In its final season, Matthew Rhys won the Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series, and executive producers Joel Fields and Joe Weisberg won the Emmy for Outstanding Writing for a Drama Series, as well as the Golden Globe Award for Best Television Series Drama. Margot Martindale was nominated 4 times and won twice for Outstanding Guest Actress in a Drama Series. Over the course of its run, and aside from these awards, the series received widespread critical acclaim, with several publications naming it the best show on television. The American Film Institute listed The Americans as one of the top 10 television series of 2013, 14, 15, 16, and 18. Brian Tallarico from RogerEbert.com argued that while there are many good shows in the era of peak TV, The Americans was the greatest then on television, and one of the few that earns the capital G in great. Tim Goodman from The Hollywood Reporter considered The Americans to be among the Hall of Fame dramas and stated it was one of his top 5 favorite television dramas of all times. The New York Times named the series one of the best 20 TV dramas since The Sopranos. Today, for CPU's Look Back at The Americans, we've gathered a small but robust unit of agents, comprised of one familiar CPU panelist and one brand new voice, who are eager to get this high-level espionage underway. It should be noted that all of our panelists have viewed the entire series and may discuss sensitive plot points, so for those of you who have not watched The Americans and plan to do so, listen at your own risk, as there may be major spoilers. At this time, I'd like to introduce the panel. I'm going to tell them how this works and remind you, gentle listener, how this works. I will ask each of you panelists to identify yourself by your first name, just your first name. You don't have to tell us more, just your first name. And then how you came to watch The Americans, what made you start watching, how'd you find out about it, what kept you watching, did you watch all 6 seasons? And then you get to rate your interest in the show, and because we're looking back, you get to tell us how you felt at the beginning and how you felt at the end. And this is along the CPU standard character question, which changes with each show we do. Are you ready, panel?
Absolutely.
Yes, I am.
All right. So, before we get into the formal introductions, how do you feel about The Americans beginning and end? Here's the character question. You were devoted to this show. Rightly or wrongly, you believed wholeheartedly in the story this series was trying to tell. You were loyal to it, even if to a fault, but you felt that the story was so important and so necessary you would defend it until you were incapable, for whatever reason, of defending it any longer. Like Elizabeth Jennings, aka Nadezhda, you loved so many parts of the show, but there were times when you truly questioned its purpose, its message, and or the story it was trying to tell. You weren't sure how you should feel about all of it in the end, but you loved the writing, characters, and performances, and kept watching largely for those reasons, like Philip Jennings, aka Mikhail. You liked it, but there were times when you simply didn't understand it or spent too much time trying to make sense of it. It opened your eyes to what being a spy on either side of the Cold War must have been like, even if in your heart you knew there were other, probably better ways to go about changing the world. You also found many of the main characters complicated, and you struggled with them deeply on a personal level, like Paige Jennings. You enjoyed the family aspects of the show, but were largely oblivious to the larger spy or Cold War story. Maybe you were too young to remember the Cold War, or you were just too wrapped up in your own life or in the present to find reason to understand or to enjoy the larger period backdrop of this series, like Henry Jennings. You enjoyed the larger spy or Cold War story, but felt that the family aspects of the show overly complicated the drama and or possibly dragged it down. You hoped that the characters would intersect more or would learn secrets faster, and the parts you liked best were the parts in which characters did interact and discovered each other's secrets, particularly when the characters were from each side of the Cold War, though you did at least enjoy the friendship between Stan and the Jennings, like Stan Beeman. You felt surprisingly neutral about the show. In some ways, you could find a way to understand all sides and to enjoy all show elements depicting family versus spy life, America versus Russia, even as you also felt critical of aspects of much of it. In the end, you persevered with the show because, if nothing else, you felt it was your duty to do so, like Oleg Igorovich Burov. Now I'm going to get really caught up in the Russian, just so you know. You didn't care for the parts of the show that focused on Russians living in American life, or the Americans generally. For you, the only elements of interest in this series centered on the Russian side of the equation, be it the residentura, the fatherland, the clandestine meetings, and or the spy capers carried out by the KGB agents like Arkady Ivanovich Zotov or Claudia. You didn't care for the part of the show that focused on the Russians generally. You wanted the FBI to catch those commie bastards living on American soil and persevered in watching the show with the hope that one day the Americans would convincingly win that Cold War, history be damned, like Dennis Adderholt. You liked the show at first, but it took a turn for you somewhere in the middle and you were forced to stop watching. or life circumstances got in the way of you being able to continue watching the show. In any event, you could no longer enjoy it with the same perspective you had when you started watching it, and so you felt like you could no longer continue to watch it, like Martha Hanson. You hated this show. It started off okay for you at first, but something about it led you to suspect that you could never fully be on board with the story, or you didn't relate to much of it anyway. In the end, you had to stop watching, like Sandra Beeman, or you stopped watching it or couldn't watch it anymore because, spoiler, you died, like Chris Amador, Nina Sergeyevna Krylova, Frank Gadd, or William Crandall. Who would like to start?
I'll start.
Okay, that's
Hi.
probably a good idea.
Hi, this is Samantha.
Hi, Samantha.
Hi. So, let's see. I came to start watching the show because I like shows that have cool commercials and they catch my eye. So, I had to give it a try and I really liked it. I really enjoy period pieces, especially when they go all in on the authenticity factor just from the look of it. So, I was really keen on it from that perspective. I did watch all 6 seasons, a little begrudgingly at the end. So I have a total of 4 characters to put into the mix.
4? Well, you're going to have to say where you are beginning and end, though, remember.
Right, okay, so 4 total, 2 and 2.
Okay, fair enough.
Does that make it better?
It does. I don't actually judge that. Other panelists do. Continue.
Alrighty, so at the beginning, I was primarily a Stan with a splash of Paige.
Okay.
And in the end, I was a Martha, though instead of stopping watching, I did stick with it to the bitter end, like Oleg.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Welcome.
Is that controversial?
It could be spicy. Well, we'll grade controversial later, but welcome, Samantha. Samantha, you
Thank
appear
you.
on some of our other panels. What panels do you appear on? Don't make me remember them.
I do. One of my first ones was Gilmore Girls, and I've been on The Crown and Friends. More recently, Westworld, Jane the Virgin, and the ever-continuing Grace and Frankie.
Yes. Welcome back, Samantha.
Thank you.
So I'm Aubrey,
Hi, Aubrey.
and hi. I'm very excited that this is my first podcast to be doing.
We're excited to have you.
To be honest, I don't even really remember what it was that caught my eye about this show. I think I saw like a commercial for it, and it's like, oh, that looks like it could be good. I really like Carrie Russell, so I think that's really what kind of piqued my interest. So I watched it, and I really enjoyed it. But as it went on, some things were kind of like, eh. So I think overall, I would be definitely Philip, because I loved it. I really did. But like I said, as it went on, I don't know, some of the story was a little bit like rushed, I guess. That's how I felt, especially towards the end. But yeah.
Were you Philip from beginning to end?
I think in the beginning I started out as Elizabeth.
Okay.
I was like all in, probably until Nina died, and then I became Philip.
I see.
I really liked Nina, and then the way it happened, I got a little upset. So
Fair enough. I guess we'll talk about that in a minute. Welcome to the podcast, Aubrey.
thanks.
And of course, my name is Kylie. I am both moderating and participating today. Gee, I started watching The Americans because a mutual friend of at least a couple of us, kept bugging me about this show for a very, very, very long time. He thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread, and he kept asking me had I watched it, and I said no. Oh, repeatedly, no. And he really wanted to do it on the podcast. There's irony in there, which we're not going to get into. But in the end, I did ultimately try to watch The Americans, and he was right. It's really good. It's a slow burn, a very slow burn, and you have to kind of commit to it at some point. You have to make the choice that you're either in or you're out. But it is a very well put together show, though I do have some bugaboos about it, which we'll discuss. I did watch all 6 seasons. At the beginning of the show, I think I would be Philip, just because there were things that I did love, but there were also things that I questioned. Although I think it hit a high point in the middle of the series, and we'll talk about that. By the end of the show, I probably was somewhere between Philip and Paige. I liked it, but there were things I didn't understand, and I kept asking questions to myself in my brain, like what happened? Where did these people go, and why did they spend time on this? And we're going to cover some of those questions in this talk. So welcome to the panel, ladies. Thank you for talking about the Americans with us today. Now, because this is a show that kind of left very recently, relatively speaking, we're going to rate the show. And this is according to the star rating scale, which doesn't change with each show we do, which my sister calls the star business. Hillary is a panelist. The star business. So what I'd like you to do is rate the show. You can use half stars, but don't get too cute with your fractions, because I actually make an average. How would you rate this show overall? And I will tell you what this scale is. So would you rate The Americans 5 stars? Holy smokes, you have to watch everything. It's the greatest show since sliced bread. It's the Cold War. It's so thrilling. 5 stars. Was it 4 stars? It was intriguing and you watched all of it, but there were flaws that you couldn't ignore. Was it 3 stars? You maybe only watched part of the show or watched some seasons. There were things you liked, things you didn't, and you wanted to see which things actually came out in the end that you liked or didn't like. You only watched part of season 1 or maybe just a very small part of the show, and 2 stars. Chances are you were mainly bored, but there was some intrigue or fascination that you hoped would hold it together. At some point you couldn't convince yourself to keep watching. Or is it 1 star? Pass on this one, guys. It's a snoozer. It's not good. It's not interesting. It's not well done. It's all overhyped. It's not your cup of tea. There are too many options on the TV landscape to waste time on this one. 1 star. Who would like to start this?
And just to clarify, we can only pick 1 set of stars.
Yes.
This isn't like a stars at the beginning, stars at the end.
Correct. But you can put the stars in any context you want, so whatever makes sense to you. But yeah, multiple stars would be very confusing to me, and probably everybody else listening to this. So.
Okay, be that way.
I mean, okay, I will.
No, okay. Based on that.
Based on what?
I mean, to be fair, I was kind of thinking the same way, like, well, in the beginning it was these.
Right, because it's, for me, in the beginning it would go from like a 4 to a 2, but then I think if you look at the whole mishmash of it, 3.5. See,
That's not even the average of 4 and 2.
She did like the average.
Sort of.
And I didn't get too cute with the fractions.
That's true. Thank you for that.
I follow some rules sometimes.
I appreciate it. So 3.5. Why 3.5, Samantha? This is going off the rails already.
It's intriguing, and I liked how realistic it was, and initially it drew me in, and it was like, okay, it's progressing, it's unfolding, like I have to keep going, and then it sort of hit this, I wouldn't even call it a roadblock, it was like, what? And then it's off the rails, and it's hard for me to still say like, oh, this is an amazing show, it's unfolding, because now the unfolding doesn't make sense.
I probably would have to say the same thing, 3.5, because in the beginning it was really good. And even that, like, I don't want to do, like, weird fractions for you, but...
It's not a weird fraction.
The acting of Kerry Russell and Matthew Rhys was amazing from beginning to end. I don't want to, like, I don't want to make it seem like they weren't amazing, because they were. But it did. It started out really strong, and then after a certain point... It time jumped a little bit, and then all of a sudden it's like certain people disappeared, and they never really said what happened to them. I don't know, like, it was like all of a sudden it's like they didn't really know where to go, so they just kind of, well, let's skip to this, I don't know, I can't really explain it, but I think maybe I'm explaining it.
You are.
A long day.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It does make sense.
To me, because initially, yeah, I would give it much stronger stars if it had kept progressing in the way that it was. Or
even if it, ended it, probably, season 5 and 6, I don't know, just felt very rushed to me. They felt like they needed to end it, so they, just kind of, these are the important things, we have to hit them, but then it's like they didn't really hit all the important things.
But it also felt, those seasons in particular, felt very slow as a viewer.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Of, where is this going?
Right. Like season 5 felt that way, and then season 6, like, oh shoot, we got to end it. That's how it felt to me anyway.
Yeah, someone missed the memo and they tried to course correct.
Right. Yes.
All right. 3.5 stars. That's a good average so far. And now I'm going to throw it off a little bit. After all is said, I know, right? After all is said and done, I'm actually going to give it a 4, although I share all of these same things that you're saying. I give it the 4 stars because mainly for the originality of the concept. There's nothing that I have watched before or since that is like this show. And so I give it kind of bonus points for being very original in a TV landscape that is stuffed with things that are really not that original.
Yeah.
Plus,
that's a good point.
Yeah.
You make me sound so unreasonable.
You do you. You are entitled to your feelings. Okay. But that's what I responded to when I first started watching it. Was like, wow, this is a really, really interesting original concept. They're doing a really good job as a period piece in a period I actually was alive for. It's pretty immersive, and there's a lot going on, and they did keep it very tight in those first 2 seasons. Plus, as Aubrey said, Kerry Russell and Matthew Rhys are outstanding the whole 6 seasons. So they did what they could with what they were given, but I totally agree that there are flaws, and the flaws pretty much start in season 4 and go through the end of the series. I think they wrapped it up okay, but there's just they lost a lot of story threads that they had developed over the course of time, and there were things that they spent maybe too much time on that they didn't really need to spend so much time on, and there were things they could have focused better on, and there are stronger and weaker parts of the show, but that's what we're going to talk about. So I didn't throw off the average too much, maybe a little. It's fine.
I was hoping you'd do some sort of crazy fraction.
No, why would I do that to myself when I asked you not to do it?
You never know. You could throw us a curveball.
Hashtag I hate math. So no. But maybe someday I'll get crazy. But that day is not today. So talk about the Americans. So we've kind of hinted at what we've sort of really liked at a high level and what we didn't like, although we weren't specific. So now it's time to get specific. Talk to us about basically either these problems that you had or the things that you really loved, wherever you want to start.
Well, let's start with some good stuff.
Okay.
So the component that maybe, and this is perhaps some of the originalness that you were referencing a few minutes ago, of just the way they played off of, in the early seasons, their spy life, their family life, and then how that blended together of them then using Stan, and how those lines get blurred of what's my real life and what's my job, and realizing that there's really no separation there ever. Even, sure, to a certain extent, like they had to build up their own travel agency business and no one was fronting it for them. It was legitimate. But then that's also not where their focus is, because they have to be keeping track of all these different areas and all these different threads that they were either getting going or tying together, and from their different, what would you call them? Like their handlers of saying, okay, now you need to do this, but then they also still seem to understand where that fit into the bigger picture of what they were trying to do. So I thought it made being a spy more accessible and easier to understand, like how people actually live doing that job.
Yeah, I think it actually spent some time building sympathy for that other side, because back in the day when I was a kid, alive in this period, that was, the rhetoric on television was very much anti-communist, anti-Russia. They were evil. There was really not a lot good said. There was no sympathy generated. So I liked the fact that it kind of gave you a window into the other side and humanized it, as opposed to just calling USSR, Soviet Union, the enemy.
Right. And I liked how they even showed the spy agency from their perspective too, and how they integrated in speaking Russian and the subtitles in kind of a similar way as what the series Jane the Virgin did, of just making it feel very natural. Like it wasn't weird that they were speaking Russian, and now all of a sudden I have to read the show I'm watching. It didn't feel out of place.
One of the most compelling parts for me was when, since Elizabeth and Philip had spent such a long time in America, and in their sleeper agent identity, they didn't do a lot of speaking Russian, so whenever there were those scenes where they actually had to interact with their culture again, whether it was talking to somebody from the residenture, or one of my favorite scenes in the whole series was when they got married in secret by Father Andre. I thought that was a very beautifully shot scene, very well acted, and it was always it kind of gave me a little thrill when Kerry Russell and Matthew Rhys actually spoke Russian, because you could tell that they probably practiced it. It's not a native tongue for them, and it was so rare that it just kind of gave me it pulled at my heartstrings, because it reminded you that they really did have these identities when they were more esoteric overall, because they were talking about the country, the homeland, and what they were doing for it, but they were ultimately so American in their identities.
Right. I think the reason it pulls at your heartstrings is because it amps up the intimacy factor.
Yeah.
Like, you get that that's something that they probably shouldn't be doing, but that's how they're so close.
I think that's also one thing they did a really good job of building up to, because really in the first season, I mean, you do see that they're close, but you see them truly become husband and wife throughout the series.
That's right.
I mean, yeah, they have kids, they have a life together, they have this very cookie cutter life as you're looking at it from the outside, but when you see it from the inside, you can see that they really aren't that husband and wife that you think they are. But I do love that they show that build up to them becoming that husband and wife. And I think that really plays a lot into, the acting between the two of them, but it shows it, like, that is a forbidden thing, that they were not really supposed to become that attached to each other, because then, they can't really do their job the way they need to do their job, because, let's be honest, who would want to do that job if you're attached to someone the way that they became attached? And you saw that also start to really play into how they're doing their job, and I love the way that they built that up between the two of them, because they built it so beautifully into this thing, and it kind of all came to a head at that wedding.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And but at the same time, after living so closely together for decades, how could you not?
Well, and their chemistry was fire. Obviously they're together now. They weren't together when they started the show, but that chemistry was so palpable from moment one, even when they were in that awkward, I don't know if I really love you, but I might love you phase.
Right. And I loved it too, once again, going back to just them as actors, just the looks that they would give each other. And not even like the eye contact. It's like the looks they would give each other as the other person is walking away, or not even looking at them and talking about like the job that they had to do. You could just feel the tension between them. And I think that was just beautifully done.
Yeah, the quiet scenes were some of the best scenes, where there weren't a lot of words exchanged, because of that tension and that performance quality. And
I think that the tension, too, comes to a head with the whole Martha storyline. Mm-hmm. He was so close to her, and he I believe, truly did love her.
Yes.
And you could see hurt in Elizabeth's eyes, especially towards the end of his job with Martha. You could just see her really struggling with that, because she loved him, and she knew that he loved her, but then there's also this other woman that she really could not be jealous of, because that's his job. So to see her struggle with that, on top of trying to figure out her own feelings in the whole situation, was intense.
Yeah.
For sure. Another intense portion of the story, and probably the piece of the story or the show that I responded to the most, was the journey of Paige.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Because she was our window, our questioner, our thinker, our reactor to everything that was going on. She asked the questions that I probably would have asked if I was in the same situation. Wow, where'd they find her?
Yeah. Yeah, she was amazing.
She reflected that feeling of betrayal. Because really, how would you feel if you found that out about someone you thought you knew?
Well, and they built that they built that tension and that rise to her not only her revelation, but also that long period of her having to keep mom and dad's secret, and also secretly being wooed as a possible second generation sleeper agent. That was just so well done. That, for me, was probably the most exciting part of the story, aside from Elizabeth and Philip's personal relationship.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm always confused on why they didn't do more with Henry, though, because up until the final episodes, he felt like such a throwaway character, other than the connection with Stan. It's like, why aren't you working on making him a sleeper agent? Like, if this is the whole goal.
There was one point I remember thinking, why'd you even have him? He didn't need to be on the show, to be honest. Because, like you said, he is always at Stan's house.
So or at boarding school.
Right, and you would think, and this is where my head goes with that. Okay, A, why is Henry not questioning any of this?
Right?
And B, why isn't Stan questioning any of this? I mean, you have this kid who's not your kid, who's literally at your house all the time. And he's just like, oh yeah, no, it's fine. I'm sorry, if I had someone at my house like that, why are you not home? Why are your parents not home? They're travel agents, and they're always gone.
Right.
I feel like that should have clicked a little bit sooner.
Well, I think my assumption is that they created his character because they wanted to have them look like the perfect American family, a daughter and a son. But then they never actually did anything with it. So it was like, once they had him, it was like, what do we do?
Yeah. Right.
And just never developed it. But to me, that they could have taken him down a similar path as Paige and presented it as almost a duality of, okay, you have one kid who's very much like, yeah, homeland that I really know nothing about, but I'm all in. And then, and maybe they did this in a way by having him really embracing the boarding school life and the more American life that he had. But it would have been more interesting to have him be in the know and then reject it. Right. That would have felt more meaningful.
Right.
I think what you were supposed to buy, I agree with Stan's revelation, knowing the truth or figuring out the truth in like the last 2 episodes was way too late.
Yeah.
Yes.
What you were supposed to buy, I think, was that A, he was so distracted by the genuineness of his relationship with Philip. B, he had all those marital troubles and then a series of relationships with other women until he met, she actually played Marita Covarrubias on the X-Files. Renee or whatever her name was.
Do you think she's really a spy or not?
See,
like they allude to it pretty heavily, but is it a red herring?
Right.
It was never resolved.
No.
It's kind of frustrating.
That bothered me.
That bothered me too.
And they kind of yeah, maybe she is. And they really, I think, had them question it hard for that reason, because they wanted you to come up with the answer to it however you would see it. I just wanted the answer. I didn't want to come up with it myself. I wanted them to tell me.
Right. I agree. But to a certain extent, it makes you, in the way they present them as this, normal American family, and they have it all, and then knowing what's really going on behind the scenes, if you think of it in a more meta way, it's like, who can we ever trust? Like, really, who are my neighbors? So taking it down that path of questioning everything and mistrust of everything.
I just wanted a yes or no answer, that's all.
I agree. That would have been much more convenient.
But at the same time, I kind of understand why they didn't. Because like you said, it's, can you trust the people that you think you can trust?
Yeah, but did they need her with that question by the time that they posed that question? That's my problem with it. Like, you're going to drop this character in so 13th hour. It's fine if she's just, a good relationship partner for Stan, but to raise this question of doubt, I don't think she's a worthwhile device for the viewer to think, oh, anybody could be the KGB. I mean, I had no sympathy for that character.
It would have made more sense if that had happened sooner.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, it feels like that was something that they kind of just threw in to be like and it became more of a, why? That's real.
Right.
Yeah, it should have, if they wanted to develop it the way I think they wanted it to be developed, even if it was so short of a time. They should have done it sooner. And they could have. They could have for sure, because poor Stan.
I know, you really start to feel bad for him because it's like, man, this guy cannot catch a break.
He had the worst luck.
And he's such a nice guy.
I know. He was.
Hashtag nice Stan. So what?
Well, and it's a testament to, oh gosh, what's his name? Emmerich, as an actor.
Oh, for sure.
Of how well he plays that back and forth. Because he still had, even though he was such a nice guy, on a human level and a personal level, he was still very tough when it came to his job and some of the things he had to do, just because of how tense the times were. And very much, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. There's no gray area here.
Yes. I'm not going to say what I thought I was going to say. So
Sorry.
Never mind. No, it's fine. So is there anything else that you liked, or do you want to talk about what you didn't like, other than the Renee open-ended question?
A thing that I liked that turned into a thing I didn't like was the Oleg and Nina relationship.
Yes!
Like, I liked that they showed, even though Elizabeth and Philip were Russians, but I almost think of them as like the American version of that spy relationship. And Oleg and Nina were very much the Russian perspective of that close relationship, where it's like, you know, the job gets in the way and then the personal stuff gets in the way, and it's all just intermingled and you can't cleanly separate it. So I liked it. I didn't certainly like how things went down or what happened to her, but I think it was very realistic.
I agree with that.
You really liked Nina, Aubrey?
I did. I really liked how they wrote her character, and I really liked the way that she portrayed that character. She was vulnerable, but at the same time, she was very strong in the way that she made her decisions. The end, I just have to say, the episode where she is killed is the way they do it, because they build up so much to her helping, and you think, okay, she's gonna get out of this. Like, she's done what she needs to do. They see that she is truly where her loyalties lie, or where they need to be. They're gonna let her go, I guess, in a way. And then it literally was like, boom, she's dead. And it was shocking, like, because it was so quick. Like, literally, it was just, I have no words for the way they did it. It was amazing. I thought it was really well done. That episode was probably one of my favorites. I loved her. And she actually, I can't remember her name, the actress's name. She's actually going to be in the new Walking Dead series, so I'm kind of excited about that.
Oh, all right. Well, and I think her whole character I liked her too. The one thing that I think they didn't develop well enough with her was sort of her motivation from the very beginning, where she was kind of stealing the stuff, and then sort of that beginning relationship. I get when she was finally in the informant role, it was much better written and more well done, but all the stuff leading up to it, I was just a little like, well, you could have done a better job of giving us a way to sympathize with her, but I think she earns it later too. And I agree, the death scene, I mean, the show did not let us forget, even though it was helping us to sympathize a little bit with the USSR side of things, it surely did not let us forget that it was still a communist state with a very totalitarian way of approaching things.
Right.
Which is oddly timely in today's socio-political sphere. So...
Great.
Well,
did they ever really say, and maybe they did, and I just don't remember, but did they say why she turned to become an...
She was stealing stuff and selling it back, and somehow counterintelligence found out, and that's how they roped her in. They basically blackmailed her, like, if you don't agree to help us, we're going to turn you in.
Okay, that's right. I remember that now.
But I don't recall them really going into what her motivations were for that. So, like, the storyline for Martha of how she sort of accidentally stumbled her way into being in a bad spot, I think it was much cleaner to see how she accidentally did that than Nina.
Yeah, it was almost a throwaway, like you were supposed to... I think the leap that I made in my mind, and I don't know if that was intended, was, well, you know, everybody was basically poor in Cold War Russia, and she was trying to make a better life for her family, but I don't even think it went that far in the explanation, which is why I think it was underdeveloped. Because when she first came on the scene, I didn't dislike her, but I didn't really feel anything toward her at first. Like, why am I supposed to care about this girl all of a sudden? And then eventually they earn it. They put her in that informant position, and all of a sudden she becomes a person of interest to you. But up until that point, she just kind of appears, and with very little fanfare and very little explanation.
Well, that's a bit of a trademark of this show of how it approaches things. It's like you mentioned before, the slow burn approach of you just have to trust that things are going to pay off later. And
they don't always.
Well, they don't always, but there was a good amount of time where, unlike the Losts of the world, you felt like you were getting enough payoff and there was enough progression that at least I could see as a viewer to believe that that was still happening. And like, okay, this will matter later. It's all just stitching together. Joke's on us.
Really? Is it a joke?
Well, and it's in a more general sense, I enjoyed the show a lot more when Russia wasn't so prominent in real life politics. And it timed around the same time that the show started to go off the rails, so it was sort of easier to decouple from it.
Do you remember which event made it seem off the rails to you?
Not specifically. I think things for me just seemed less clear, like when they started going down the path of the genetically modified food and trying to poison and the corn, and that's for me where things started to get more muddled of like, it wasn't this back and forth between the FBI and them. It brought in these other components that muddied it for me. But in a general sense, I went through kind of a similar state of getting disinterested in shows around the time of the Iraq War and when shows started putting more military storylines in too. So I think if there had been less real life political strife around that time, maybe I would have been more interested in sticking with it. But it just got to be like, oh my gosh, enough with all the Russia talk.
Okay, but they were Russian.
No, I know, but it's just so, and maybe for people who don't follow the news on a regular basis or aren't super interested in politics on an ongoing basis, maybe that's not a component that would be impacting them for watching a show and being able to separate the two better than I can. It just sometimes gets to be too much.
I also feel like they kind of, and maybe this is just me looking at it now as, you know, it's all said and done. I feel like the last 2 seasons, they started writing it where you didn't sympathize with the Russians as much. And I don't know if they did it just because they felt the story needed to go that way or because of everything that was going on. I don't know.
Well, and I'm not going to lie. I felt sure at some point, and I can't tell you when, that we were eventually going to see at least Philip defect.
I felt like he was going to defect the last 3 seasons.
Yeah.
Season finale, I looked at my husband and I said, he's gonna run, and he never did. So it's just like, I felt like they would bring him right to the edge, and then 3 episodes into the next season they would bring him back, and then they push him back to the edge, and it's just like, just do it. Like, you want to do it, then do it. Don't dance around the line of him staying or going. And it kind of just tiring after a while. It's like, you want him to leave. Like, you can tell that they wanted him to leave, but they didn't. And it was just...
I think it was his love for Elizabeth that wouldn't, even though he stopped working for or with her, he couldn't leave her to be totally on her own.
Here's the thing. I think it was, and I don't remember, was it the end of season 4 or 5? They both were acting like, this is it, we're going to go.
I think it was 5.
And then the next season, the very first episode, they had Elizabeth acting like nothing was wrong. Whatever had happened in the season finale hadn't happened, and yet Philip was still fighting it. And it's just like, it's kind of like they forgot how they ended that season.
It was season 5.
I think that was 5 into 6.
It was.
It 5 into 6?
And that's maybe also contributed to the disconnectedness. I actually think they got more sympathetic towards the Russians or showing them in a more human way in the later seasons. Like once Oleg went back to Russia and protecting his family and seeing some of the fallout of missteps.
Certain characters I feel like they did. I feel like the handlers, they made them more harsh as it went on.
Oh, yes.
It was because they wanted it to push Philip to the point of being done. But I feel like they pushed so hard towards the end of the season. Yeah, I think it was season 5. I feel like it was so obvious so that they were both done. I mean, like at the end, you could just see it. They were done. They wanted to just go. And then to not even really touch base in the very first episode of the next season. I don't know. It just felt very weird to me.
It's like there's a lost episode.
Right, exactly. Like what happened to pull Elizabeth back, but to leave Philip where he was? Because they were so in it. Like they were together. Like it's either all or nothing with them. And all of a sudden it was like, you didn't see that disconnect between the two of them. And then when it happened and you saw it, it's like, wait a second, where did that come from? Because they were so, it's like, if you go, I go. And then it was not like that at all. I mean, so I don't know. That's part of it for me. Like that's one of the things that I just I couldn't wrap my head around it. So it just threw me off for like a lot of the first few episodes of that next season.
That transition was when they did the time jump.
Yes.
Because I had the very same reaction, especially at the end.
Okay.
Actually, the season 5 finale, because season 5 was kind of probably the most tedious season of all of them for me, because I think that was the one with the corn that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's like the only thing I remember from that season.
Yeah, the corn and the bugs, and it was kind of X-Files in a way, which should have appealed to me, but it didn't go alien route, so it didn't. But it was very kind of all gobbled up into itself, and that guy that was sort of the one that got eaten by the virus, and they were digging his grave, that all happened in that season.
Yeah. I honestly forgot about him.
That stuff seems so much more global impact than everything else they had done that was so much more tactical. Like, we need to turn this person because of this reason, and we're doing this because of that. And it was all connected, and that was missing that component. Like, they were just trusting you to believe, like, hey, this is like fate of our country, fate of the world level stuff, but it didn't translate for me.
No. And then in that transition, in that time jump, all of a sudden, do you not only get that sort of rebooting, starting over feeling where Philip is fed up, but Elizabeth has somehow decided that she has to persevere in this role. But then you've got Paige running around as a spy now, basically, a junior apprentice spy or something. She's in college, and there's really not a lot of explanation as to how they got there, and I really felt like they needed to explain that, because she was resisting that for literally 5 seasons, and then all of a sudden she was doing it.
I did like that her mom took her under her wing, and when Paige realized that, like, hey, my mom's a real badass, and like, okay, she's going to teach me how to defend myself. Like, I liked those moments between the two of them because they connected so much. Where before the kids were just kind of accessories in this fake life.
Sure.
Yeah.
I also want to say, again, being old and having lived through the 80s, there were things that were not accurate. First of all, I know Carrie Russell's hair is the stuff of legend from Felicity to now, but nobody wore their hair like that.
Would have been bigger.
It would have been so much bigger.
Yeah, her hair would have been huge.
She's got like this long mane of straight hair. Nobody had that. Not even older people.
Talk about how she fit that hair underneath all those wigs?
Right.
Because seriously,
that would have taken hours to pin curl.
Yes, and she would take it off and like it would flow. It's like, girl, that wasn't pin curled under there. There is no way that fit underneath those wigs.
So she's got Hollywood hair.
It's true.
And there were just other things, small details in the art direction that I felt they were a little sloppy with. Maybe it's hard to get 80s stuff now. I don't know. I mean, that was 30 years ago. That makes
it's not that hard.
Well,
they're Hollywood. They can do it.
Okay, well, so then they have no excuse, and there were things that I didn't like.
Stranger Things can do it. They could have.
That's right. Stranger Things does it. Stranger Things makes me feel like I'm still in elementary school.
Yes.
Whereas this show, it's so the school those kids went to is so similar to the school that I went to. I
mean, this last season with the mall, I just like, oh my gosh, that's Sam Goody. And like all of those stores in the mall, I'm like, I remember going to the mall and seeing those stores.
Yes. The Americans, they did a fairly okay job sometimes with the art direction. They found some things and I was like, oh, okay. But there were things like even vehicles and just kind of sloppy things that were clearly anachronistic. They were not, or they were too old. Which I guess you could explain by the 70s wasn't too far off, but I don't know. There were just things that took me out of it at times, and I was just like, they didn't have... That's not how it would have... No!
I couldn't get over Paige's wallpaper in her room.
What was her wallpaper? I don't remember that.
Oh, it was hideous. It was like that really dark red, like weird... I can't even just explain the design. And I could be like, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not thinking of what it really looked like. I just remember anytime they're in Peter's room, I was just like, that's it's too much.
It clearly wasn't a great time for interior design as a general rule.
Right. That's true.
And here's my next question. That house was big. Very, 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 and they were running a very small time travel agency. Where'd they get that money?
Well, to be fair, it was the 80s, so things didn't cost quite as much as they do now.
But still.
How big that house was.
Maybe they had no equity.
They were on an adjustable rate mortgage? Is that what you're saying?
Maybe they didn't buy the house.
Who bought it?
I don't know.
I think they would have to, though, for everything.
Well, I'm just saying maybe they were given the money.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe let's just think in like very loose financial terms. If you're always thinking that you're going to have to go on the run, you're not really committing to a mortgage.
It's true.
That just raises more questions.
Right, exactly.
Things have not changed in that market.
The Handlers had their own apartments. Obviously, they weren't paying for the apartments. It was said, I think, in one of the seasons that they weren't, the resident bureau was paying for the apartments, weren't they?
Yeah, but those apartments were kind of like...
Spartan.
Right.
Yeah, and run
maybe
down.
that kind of gives you a peek into how they were paying for the house.
I guess.
Because if they do have to pick up and run...
Well, and money was tight since they struggled to pay for boarding school.
That is, yeah.
So...
Okay, but most people struggle
I think
to
it's
pay
better
for
if you just don't do the math.
Probably.
Yeah.
Something people don't normally think to themselves, like, how are they affording that house?
I couldn't help it, okay? It was a really big house in the Washington, D.C. area. This is not a cheap place.
I wondered about the size of the house, but not from a math perspective. It always seemed like the inside just didn't seem to match what the outside looked like.
Well, that's because we only ever saw downstairs and the 2 bedrooms, basically.
Yeah. So where's all the other...
It's all the garage.
Oh, right. We did see the garage.
Really big garage.
It was a really big garage.
And then they had this itty bitty little room for their laundry and their secret stuff. It's like, I don't know. I didn't get it. So the house was the garage.
Bottom line, none of us would make it as a spy.
No.
I mean, that goes without saying.
Suspend our disbelief long enough.
I'm sorry. These are sometimes the things that I think about watching these shows.
Well, but I think period pieces lend themselves to that more because it's easier to notice when things are off.
Yeah.
Right. Especially if you grew up in that.
For sure.
You notice it.
That's true. So
I'm sorry, her hair would have been big too, and her hair was not big at all. There were the big bangs that you needed 2 cans of Aquanet to like keep up, and like the feather, I don't.
Especially because she was in college, she totally would have had a puff roll or a spiky bang solution.
Yep. And I didn't see one scrunchie. That's all I'm gonna say.
or leg warmers. Although I will.
They took it in a very non-colorful direction.
Yeah, there were no
They were paying for the house, so they couldn't pay for all those things that they needed in the 80s.
But I will say that the soundtrack was very awesome. And if you're a Spotify user, somebody's actually gone to the trouble of compiling that soundtrack, which I will hyperlink in the entry around this episode.
That's awesome.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah. Did you have a favorite season? Could you pick one season and say this one was my favorite?
I don't know that I could. Maybe the first, just because it was so novel about how they were living their life and how they were entangled with the FBI. But I think that bleeds into like the second season, so I'm not feeling super confident.
I think the first 3 were my favorite. I know you asked for one, but I can't pick between the first 3.
Oh, a fellow rule breaker. I love it.
No,
that's what I'm doing.
There are no rules here.
There's guidelines. How about Aubrey's a guideline breaker, like me?
Is that a thing?
I like to live dangerously.
Like a spy? I would actually say, I actually thought about this question because when I finished the series, I was like, well, I kind of have mixed feelings on it now that I'm at the back end. But the 3rd season, I think, was my favorite. That was the one when Paige found out. She also had to kind of skirt around the church that she was attending.
I totally forgot about the church. Me too.
Yeah, that was a very awkward time.
Tells the minister, oh my, I wanted to kill her when she told him. I was like, oh my God, girl, what are you doing?
And it's still shocking that they didn't kill him.
Right?
I know, that was
so
different.
Them in.
Yeah.
Totally forgot about the church storyline. Oh my gosh.
Yep. That was all part of that build-up because they were really not into... I mean, they basically present as atheists and are very not okay with this.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I do remember Elizabeth. Oh, man. Some of her best acting, I think, was with this church storyline. Just the tension in her body whenever Paige would bring it up, whenever she would go to the church. Just her face would just get... Oh, it was so good. It just... you could see it in her mouth. Just the minute she started talking about it, her mouth went into, like, the straight line and just... Her whole body got tense. It was good. I'm remembering so much now.
This is what happens. Who was your favorite character? Or do you have just one?
I don't think I could pick just one.
There are no guidelines.
I think
Well, good, because if there were, I'd break them anyway.
So dangerous.
Oh, I really think I can pick just one.
Okay.
And I think it's Oleg.
Really? I mean, he's good.
He's surprisingly dynamic. Like, when you first meet him, you're just like, oh, he's just like another Russian spy. And he seems so linear in, like, this is my mission and this is what we're going to do. And then as he starts getting...
More fleshed out?
Well, not even more fleshed out, but you can sort of see that progression of him thinking more about his place in the world, and it's not all just black and white, right and wrong, and recognizing the gray areas. And as he gets to know people on a human level, he got surprisingly dynamic to me. And I was bummed when they reduced his presence in later seasons.
He had a big presence in the 6th season.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying.
But it wasn't the same. It definitely closed his arc or his circle to bring it back, but I was kind of disappointed that he left his family.
Yeah.
To follow through. Like, I know he felt like he had a duty to do that, but I was like, oh, dude, you got a baby. Stay in Russia.
The whole country was at stake. I mean, I'm just saying.
I know.
That's a big deal. I'm going to confess that Philip is my favorite character. Hands down, Philip. Not only is Matthew Rhys oddly attractive, but I'm just saying. But
I agree with that statement.
So true.
Yeah. I mean, Carrie Russell is fabulous, and I've watched her in other things. I was a Felicity watcher. I mean, all of those things. And she did a really great job. But her character, of course, takes the hard line. She's the party. She's the homeland. And I don't know if I could say she was my favorite because of her character stance. Not because she didn't do a fabulous job, Philip was so complicated in his emotions and reactions, and he, in every ounce, deserved that Emmy that he got at the end, because that was after the show had ended when they gave him the Emmy. I don't know. He was amazing. Like, there was, even when the story wasn't great, he still hit it out of the park every time. And I can't think of another character that even comes close, or another performer that even comes close for me.
I can agree with. See, mine's. I really like Philip and Elizabeth. Like, those are my two until the 6th season. Then I'm not really a fan of Elizabeth, but their choices are so different from each other. But I don't know. I can't really explain it, and my head isn't really forming the sentences that I need it to form to say them out.
You basically liked Philip and Elizabeth.
Right. That's what it is.
Okay, fair.
They're my favorite. They're great. No, I agree with you on Philip. Like, he is one of the reasons why I kept watching, especially that last season. He is the reason why I watched, because that last scene between him and Stan in the parking garage was probably one of the best scenes, I think, in the whole series.
I think that's the monologue that got him the Emmy, basically.
Yeah, that was amazing. I thought
surprised.
for sure Stan was going to shoot him.
Yeah.
Yes. I was very surprised that he didn't.
Yes. Oh, but yeah, that scene, so good. It was so full of tension, and like, you literally, I just remember like holding my breath through that whole thing, because you just didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah, but what he said was so honest. And
Yes.
the way he said it. So good.
So good.
That's actually a natural segue to my next question. So now we're actually in the series finale, and we have our various feelings about everything that led up to it. What did you think of the series finale? Did you think it was a proper send-off for the story and the characters as you knew it?
I actually do. I think they ended it, I don't think they could have ended it any other way other than them running. I think it was a good way to end this series. I truly don't think they could have done it any other way. I don't think they could have had them run. It would have left things way too open-ended. I will say the one thing that I still can't wrap my head around is them leaving Henry. Even though he was so thrown aside the whole series, I don't understand them leaving their child. Because no matter what or how these children came into the family, they were still their children. They did still love them as they were their children. And for them to literally just be like, okay, well, we're leaving and he's staying. We're not going to tell him anything. We're literally just going, and then leaving it to Stan. Like, that was the one thing that made me not happy. I mean, I guess it kind of makes sense because they did ignore him for so long. Why would you bring him with you? But that's the only thing about the finale I did not like. I understood Paige's reason for what she did, getting off the train at that point. I totally understand it. I thought the ending was great. I really do. I would have said a little bit more about Martha and what happened with her. I mean, like, yes, she was in Russia, but literally it's like they showed her one time and then that's it. Okay, she's there. But they should have closed that better, personally.
Oh, I kind of like how they left it so open-ended. Like, they basically showed, like, this is what her life's going to be like. I don't think that checking back in on her would have been much different. For me, I really struggled through the last season. And if not for doing this podcast, I probably would have left it 5 or 6 episodes from the end. And I was like, nope, I gotta, like, I've spent this much time on it, gotta finish it out.
I mean, if you had watched, I know, podcast obligation, blah, but just to leave it at 5 or 6 episodes, like, at that point, you have really invested all the time.
Right, and I probably would have gotten around to it eventually. The podcast, I won't blame it all on the podcast.
Thank you.
the podcast, it moved it up for me in priorities of, like, okay, like, I've gotta finish it so I can know what happened. Because, like you said, when you put that many seasons to something, to just be just kind of over it, but it became work to watch the show. And that's always, to me, the point when it's like, this is not a good use of my time when I kind of dread watching it. So the finale for me kind of pulled it back to making it relevant. And I think they ended it the best way they could have. But I was not only frustrated with the just leaving Henry part, but the feeling that them leaving is, okay, now we have to go home to Russia. It's you haven't lived there in so many years, and if you're truly as good of spies as you are, what's to stop you from just disappearing and starting your life over somewhere in the US or somewhere in Canada or on an island somewhere? It didn't really make sense to me, as much as nostalgia as they had for like, oh, I miss home. They'd spent more than the majority of their life in the US and not in Russia. So the way it ended, I kind of watched them go home and, pull over and look at the city, and in so many ways it made sense. But at the same time, I was just like, what? Like, seriously, that's how you're going to end this? Like, what now? And depending on how the various political stuff shakes out, I was thinking to myself, this probably isn't even all that wise to be going back into the mix of things, because if your side doesn't win, you're kind of screwed. That to me kind of was like, wow, it's over and that's it.
I guess for me, thinking of them going back, Stan knew that it was them. Granted that they didn't use real names or anything with their spies, but once the FBI knows who you are, is there really anywhere you can hide other than your homeland? You know what I mean? Like, all it takes is sending pictures out. They can find you, especially Canada or Mexico.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I
thought it was interesting that they had that many sketches of them, and it took him that long to put it together. Just so odd. I thought he was a better agent than that.
Yeah, he never saw them in their other aliases, so like the wigs with the glasses and all those things.
Yeah.
Right, and all he saw was awesome Carrie Russell hair.
And remember, Stan actually had left the counterintelligence unit. He wasn't working with Dennis for a large part of season 6. Dennis actually asked him to come back into it because they were getting more leads getting more beads, I guess, on the different agents and their operations, and picking up that there was this common couple who kept changing their appearance.
Wasn't the coolest part of the FBI that little robot that...
The mail robot?
Yes!
I guess. It reminded me of one of those robots in Star Wars. I couldn't help it.
It made me think, wow, the 80s were such an interesting time.
That is true. That's facts. Hashtag nostalgia.
The delivering robot in the 80s.
Yeah, I didn't have a male robot. I just wanted to point that out. I know.
Me neither.
I had really mixed feelings on the series finale. I had the same reaction about Henry, very same reaction. I was like, okay, even if you could talk yourself into he's going to have a better life, who's going to fund that life? You left. You were paying for his stuff. It didn't make any sense. And even if you kind of warded him over to Stan somehow, that's a process that could take a long time. So that didn't make any sense to me.
That's kind of what they did. It's like they kind of threw it on Stan.
Yeah, they did. Basically, tell him the truth, tell him we love him, and he's your responsibility now. Go, Stan.
He's yours. Yeah.
So I had a big trouble with that. Claudia disappeared. Where the heck did Claudia go? Margot Martindale's character? She'd been so omnipresent right up until the end, and then all of a sudden she just wasn't there. That didn't make any sense to me.
But she disappeared when Elizabeth was like, oh, I can't do this anymore. So did she go back to Russia? Or I just assumed that it was like, okay, we're no longer working together. So in classic spyness, it's like, poof.
Yeah, she did something to Elizabeth, and Elizabeth got super pissed.
Again? In season 6?
Yeah.
Elizabeth did not like Claudia at all.
But they were getting along in season 6.
That conversation, of her discovering that I think the contingent that Claudia was working with was against Gorbachev. And
oh, right. She
Elizabeth realizing, what's the right thing here?
Okay, you're right.
Break off, and her decision to run.
She did get super pissed about that. I remember that now. I forgot about that, I guess.
Because there's just so much.
There is a lot.
I feel like they tried to cram a lot into that last season that didn't really need to be crammed in there.
Yeah.
A lot of the the main people that were such a big part of the show, they kind of got lost in the whole shuffle of everything.
Well, I almost got the sense that they were pulling in the UN component and Gorbachev to ground where the story was in something that people would remember.
Yeah.
Something significant instead of having it be sort of just a throwaway, this is what we were spying on, and not have a connection for people.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I agree with that. But I did have mixed, I'll tell you, the moment in the finale that I loved was Paige on the platform. That actually caught my breath, and I cried when that happened.
Yes.
Because I did not expect it to happen. So I felt, wow, that was truly, I didn't see it coming, and they truly surprised me, and what a great moment that was. But I also agree that even though I don't have a problem with the fact that they had to go back to Russia. I agree with Aubrey's logic. Like, where could they have really gone in the end at the point where they were? But at the same time, just sort of this looking out over Moscow, and, well, now we're here and we get to start our lives over, and our children are half a world away. At the end of the show, I think I said something even on social media that was like, well, I watched it. I don't know how I feel about it, but I watched it.
It definitely left you feeling very weird emotions.
Yes.
I watched it alone, but I think I actually said out loud as I was sitting on my couch, like, what was the point of that?
Yes! That's what I had. What was the point of that? What am I supposed... What is the takeaway, other than the brilliant acting and stuff? What is the takeaway from this story? I don't know that I have that or can articulate that.
I think I could maybe... it's a stretch, but if I'm trying to get all philosophical, like, that's sort of what the whole Cold War was.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't see me shrugging, but I'm shrugging because it's a stretch.
While you described it, that works. I mean, yes, point taken, but at least the Cold War you could frame around 30 years of history, and there was an endpoint to it, per se. This just, I don't know. I don't have a problem with the open ending, per se. At the same time, this is one of the few stories where I was like, I don't know if I buy that choice, because you did close off other stories. Like, even though we did only get to see Martha for a minute in Russia, that was our closure moment for her. Like, she's here, she has to figure out how to survive, she's sort of doing it. She also was led to adopting a young child, which is what she always wanted. So that was her closure moment. There were other things that they just put on the table and did nothing with. Like, they followed Philip's other son, Misha.
Yeah, that, I kind of forgot about him, to be honest.
Well, because
he was such a boy.
He was boring and kind of pointless, but that's also because he showed up in the U.S., he couldn't actually meet his dad, he went back to Russia, and then, he's done.
Yeah,
I feel like they kind of
showing how heartless the job is, and how separated you get to be from your family, or have to be from your family. Yeah, I agree. What's the point?
Well, I don't even think it worked to show that point, because he didn't know he had this kid. Philip didn't know he had this kid. This was with that other woman that was also a spy, whose name I can't remember, who showed up and said, here's this kid, he's your son. I don't know that it showed any of that. There were a lot of those kind of pointless planting of seeds that never actually had an end, and it made you question why they were even introduced to begin with. He was a big one.
Yeah.
I guess I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt of they had good intentions in showing some things, even if they didn't properly pay them off. And I don't know that I agree even with my own logic, quite frankly.
I would have liked to have properly paid them off.
I
them
agree.
paid off. Or whatever words. That's just how I feel. So time has passed. The show ended in 2018. Not a lot of time has passed, but how do you feel about, I don't know when you last watched the show or if you watched it in real time. How do you feel about the show now that some time has passed? Do you think it will hold up? Was it time for it to go? Would you have watched more seasons, or should it have ended sooner?
It should have ended sooner.
You was almost in stereo. I agree. It should have ended sooner. Probably after season 4, I think you mentioned earlier, Aubrey, and I agree. That would have been with the wedding, I think that would have been an awesome series finale. And I didn't need to know anything after that.
Right.
Well, I think they could have almost had that, and then it still ended with the ending that they had, but move that up.
Like, that should have been the next episode after the wedding.
But there was all that other crap they shoved into it. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
So pick and choose some of that stuff.
All that said, I think it will hold up just because it's a period piece. So it's not contingent on what's happening right now.
Right.
In some ways, it makes what's happening right now all the more salient because there's echoes of things in the real world that happened in the real world before that they depicted on the show. Is this one that they should ever revive for any reason?
No.
I'm not actually a total fan of that revival thing, but some of them are okay.
I really see Paige standing on the platform as potential spinoff. Like, that was after the shock value wore off. It was like, okay, so she can get her own show now.
Paige in America.
But I don't know that I would watch that one, having been burned before.
I would not watch that.
I don't think I would either. Not that I think it would have given her an awesome opportunity to, show her acting skills more, but I don't think it would have done the character justice.
No.
And I wish people would ask that question before they do spin-offs or before they do revivals. Like, are we giving the story and the characters, are we doing them justice, or are we just going to ruin what was so good in the beginning? It just drives me crazy because half the time it's crap.
Right, and I think that's why none of the revivals have really lasted. You get that nostalgia factor for the first maybe half a season.
Right.
But they seem like they're faltering pretty quickly for the ones that are recent.
I'm going to defend a couple of them because I think the actors, A, they're all older. B, they're trying to resurrect muscle memory and these characters that they've put on from years ago. So in some ways, they're only committing to a limited run. So I'm going to, again, go back to the X-Files. The revival seasons of the X-Files are maybe not season 1 through 6 amazing, but they're better than the last couple of seasons of the original run. And I would recommend the X-Files revival. The Will and Grace revival is bumpy.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the Will and Grace revival is bumpy in that first season because I'm going to tell you Deborah Messing is a hot mess for most of it. But in the following season, it actually finds its groove again, and it's a little bit more like the original run. And so I think that's worth it. And they've only committed to a handful of seasons because they're not trying to play these characters from. But then there are other ones that are total crap that either they weren't able to get back all of the actors, or they didn't find a really good place to start that story, and I just think it's a trend that burnt out. But I think the point is taken that people should at least ask them, like Aubrey said, should we be doing this and can we do it justice? I think some of them do, but by and large, the majority of them don't. Sorry, I went on a thing, I guess.
No, that's okay.
That's okay.
Will and Grace is actually one of the ones I was thinking of it seemed like not as much time had passed, and they would be able to kind of tie it in more naturally than some of the others. It's not one that I've watched, but I thought it was interesting that they said it's, I think, going to end after season 3.
Yeah.
Is what I read. So I just think it's interesting that none of them are having the longevity. They're coming back for that nostalgia factor, and I think kind of a fun factor for the people behind the scenes and the actors. And it's cool because it's a nice continuation, but it's not meant to capture the magic of the first one.
Well, and I guess what I'm suggesting is I don't think any of these revivals were planning for a longer second run. I think they were only committing to kind of these shorter runs because it was an experiment. Some of them are more successful than others. And I think the networks are picking up on the ones that are not successful because there were no revivals that were new this season. So
I just have issue when they revive something and they're like, oh yeah, everything that happened that last season of the original run, it never happened.
She's talking about Will and Grace.
Yeah, well,
But
mad
at the
about...
same time, not just Will and Grace, Roseanne, when they came back, did the same thing, because in the very last episode of the very final show of the first run, Dan died, and then all of a sudden, look, he's back. Which, don't get me wrong, I will take any reason to watch John Goodman. I adore that man. I don't think he did anything wrong, so I'm very glad that they brought him back. But
well, it's definitely a trend,
crazy.
though. They're going to be, it's not out yet, but Spectrum is doing on their digital channel, which I think is an equivalent of the CBS All Access revival of Mad About You. And it's doing the same thing, where it's basically throwing out the last 2 or 3 episodes of the original series to put them in a place that makes sense to the age they are now and the age of their kid.
I don't even remember how that show ended.
Me neither. I don't even remember.
We'll have to do a looking back about it, Kylie.
I mean, I'd be willing. I remember watching that show. I just don't remember. I don't remember how it ended.
It had only a depressing ending, and they've thrown that out in favor of their new launching point. But even this is going to be a limited run of, I think, 8 episodes, and then that's it. So just fascinating.
Yet Fuller House has lasted 5. I just want to point that out.
Should it have lasted 5?
I'm not on that panel. I just record it. For reasons.
That's fair.
I couldn't get past the 3rd episode of the very first season of that show. I won't lie. I wanted to like it, but I just couldn't.
I couldn't.
Well, I'm on that panel for better or worse, Aubrey.
I'm sorry.
And I'm now stuck with it.
And it becomes an interesting exercise in whether the panelists hate to watch it or not. So.
Oh my God, I love it.
It is interesting.
Yes. So The Americans was, let's talk, about the show we're talking about today. Okay. So The Americans.
If we have to.
I mean, The Americans was created by Joseph Weisberg. This was his first TV show that he ever created. How do you feel he did, and would you watch anything else he creates?
I think he did a good job, and I'm willing to check it out. At least give him a try on another one.
I thought he did great. But to be perfectly honest with you, I don't pay attention to who creates the shows that I watch. So I don't know. It would really have to catch my attention.
What if they said by the creator of The Americans?
If it looks like it's going to be stupid, no, I won't watch it.
Fair enough.
I don't get to watch a lot of TV that I want to watch, so if I'm going to watch something, I have to really want to watch it.
I understand. I do pay attention to creators, but that's partially because I produce a TV podcast. I probably would watch something else he created just because I felt like he did a really good job. Even if we found things we didn't like with the show, again, the concept was so fresh and so original and so different. If he created something else that followed that same sort of freshness and originality, I definitely would check it out, regardless of what it is, just because I'd be curious to see how he did with it.
I can agree with that. It was good.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I feel like there was so much good about The Americans that it completely outweighs the bad.
Agreed.
Really, if you think about it. Because yes, the last couple seasons were horrible, but those first 4, man, they were solid. The writing was good. The acting was good. It was just, the story was good. It was solid.
Agreed.
And even season 5 had its moments.
Mm-hmm.
I think season 6 was hit and miss.
How does The Americans compare to other genre TV shows, spy thrillers, period dramas, serial dramas? Is this the type of TV that you typically gravitate to? And then how would you rank it if you do? If no, what drew you to it?
I typically don't watch spy dramas. I don't really watch drama, I guess. I mean, that's not true. I do. I don't know. I couldn't tell you really what my genre is. The thing that definitely drew me was Kerry Russell. I love her. But, I mean, if you put a spy show in front of me, if it was between that and, like, I can't even compare it to something that I would watch. So, I'm all over the place with what I watch on TV, I won't lie. Yeah, if it was between something and a spy show, I would probably choose the other thing. I don't know. I find those,
Yeah, I don't really have a specific genre or things saying that I gravitate to. It's kind of like I like what I like, and if it looks cool or interesting, I'll check it out and give it a try. I used to give shows more time to impress me if it didn't grab me right off. But now there's so many options that it's really got to get me in the first episode or two for me to keep going. So the stakes are higher the more shows that are out there.
The only spy drama apart from this one that I have ever watched was Alias. It is in no way similar to this show. I don't normally gravitate towards... I probably would not have watched The Americans if I had not been bugged to watch The Americans. I'm just going to put that out there. Because, I'd seen Kerry Russell and Felicity and Matthew Rhys. I watched some of Brothers and Sisters. They weren't necessarily the draw. I like them. It really was, you have to watch this show. Otherwise, I probably would have ignored it, to be quite frank.
Isn't it a good thing that people bug you sometimes?
It has its ups and downs. Maybe. I don't, yeah. I'm going to emphasize the use of the word bug makes me answer like that. So, the cast has been involved in many TV projects. I gave you a list when I sent out some things to consider. Would watching The Americans inspire you to watch any of those or to follow these cast members anywhere else?
It would. Margot Martindale in particular I've watched for many years. I don't think you listed it on here, but she was actually a big part of Justified.
She wasn't a regular. I only listed if she was a regular role, so she probably was a recurring role on Justified.
Okay, yes.
Sorry.
I'd say she's like recurring plus on there because her character was a significant one. No, I'm just saying that it was when I didn't watch The Americans because of her, but when I saw her on it, I was like, oh, hey. So things like that, when you get that crossover, lends some credibility, even if you already like a show. Mm-hmm. So of all the people, I'd probably be most apt to follow her because I have for a number of years, but they're all really wonderful.
I hadn't seen Matthew in anything before this, but I will definitely watch anything he's in now. He's amazing. And he's good looking, so I mean, kind of a...
I was so resisting adding in, and he's hunky too.
Oh, just say it.
That's how I make most of my decisions.
I mean, I'm not going to lie.
That's why I started watching The Walking Dead, was because I was like, oh, Andrew Lincoln, he's beautiful. And I just happened to really like the show. So.
Well, whatever connects you to great TV.
Cute boys.
Yeah, that is a primary motivation for me a lot of the time. I had seen Matthew Rhys in Brothers and Sisters, like I said. He actually played the gay brother on that one, which was... So I probably didn't regard him the same way at the time. But I agree, I think I would follow him, and I would probably follow Kerry Russell, too. This is the second show I've watched her in, so... And she's
I do love Kerry Russell.
Yeah, she's a great actress. She doesn't disappoint. She might be in some disappointing things, but she doesn't disappoint.
Yes. She's in the movie Waitress, and if you've never seen the movie, I highly recommend it. It's really good. I actually saw the movie before the musical came out. I really like it, and she's really good in it.
Oh, I really liked the musical. I didn't realize, I had seen the title of it, but I didn't realize it was connected to or the same as the musical.
It's the same story.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Follows it really good. I mean, it's really close to the movie, so yeah. I would recommend it.
Oh, I'll have to check it out. I don't know how I missed Felicity, but I did somehow. So this was the first thing I'd seen her in.
Felicity. Here's what I'll say about Felicity. The first 2 seasons are really good, but so they're a little soapy. I mean, this was WB time, so they're, it's WB. It was very good.
Love the WB.
Yeah. The second 2 seasons got they were a little interesting, especially the 4th season and especially the end. So it was J.J. Abrams' very first show. I am a J.J. cultist. I love the stuff he makes. And it was good. It was, the people in it were good. It was good. A love triangle, hunky boys. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to watch Felicity for. And her haircut was the controversy of the age.
Oh gosh.
But it's one of those shows that you're gonna really you'll probably start by loving it, but by the end you're like, did I really love that?
So just like the Americans.
But worse than Felicity.
Oh, okay.
I'm just going to say that.
That's so specific.
I watch a lot of TV. Would you recommend The Americans to others? Why or why not?
I would, because like I said, even with the bad things, the good outweighs it. I think it's worth watching. It's based on true events, so watching it, you can kind of, you can't really imagine what it would be like, but I mean, it puts you into the situation that really happened. I mean, I really enjoyed it. I thought the writing was strong for the most part. I thought the acting was unbelievable. I'm actually surprised that more of them didn't win more Emmys. Like, I'm really surprised it took until the show was over for Matthew to win, and I'm surprised Carrie didn't get anything. I mean, I think it's a strong show, even though the last couple of seasons.
I agree. I would recommend it, particularly if you're into period dramas.
I think I would recommend it too, because of its originality. I would probably caution to say that you're going to want to give it some time to catch on, because I don't think it's an instant sell, but it does get to a point kind of quickly in the first season where you can say whether or not you like it, and hopefully you would. It's a very well crafted show, aside from some of the writing things in the later seasons. So I would recommend it based on the fact that in the pantheon of all the TV that's out there right now, this probably is in the excellence category, as opposed to some of the other stuff that doesn't even come close. So is there anything else that you want to say about The Americans? This is like the last question, because sometimes people have unresolved feelings or things they wanted to say.
I do want to bring up one of the things that Philip had to do, which was the relationship he had to have with that teenage girl.
Oh, yeah.
Really? I did not like that storyline. I did not like that storyline at all. It was so against his character and against who Philip was as a person that I feel like I didn't like it. I thought they could have done that storyline with a person that was actually, not a teenage girl.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I kind of understand why they did it, to show that he had to do things that were totally against his morals, but it was just so uncomfortable for me to watch it. I just couldn't hate it. I hated it.
Well, and it was one of those ones that didn't ultimately pay off in the end. I mean, she was
right.
The daughter of a governmental employee, and all he was really doing was switching out that recording device. And she was kind of annoying. I didn't really love...
Yeah, she drove me crazy too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Plus, they made him as creepy looking as possible in his alias.
I know! and then starting out with the whole, like, hey, I can buy you pot. Okay, that's like asking to be, like, kidnapped. Am I wrong?
No, that's hashtag stranger danger.
Yeah. He should have been driving a white windowless van. Exactly. It would have completed the picture.
White, come on. That's a black van right there. Or a gray van. White almost implies something else. Kylie, yes, that was a terrible storyline. That was a lot of the 4th and 5th season.
That was one that I wish they could have not. Because, yeah, I mean, the way they ended it, it was like they kind of threw it away. So what was the point of it?
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, I guess for me, it was always surprising when you would almost get lulled into complacency, and then they would sort of hit you with something really emotional, like the moment on the train. Or, to me, one of the most gut-wrenching moments was when the painter died, and her husband gave her the painting, and she hauled it home, and then was going to destroy it, and then kept it. And you could just see this conflict back and forth, and I really thought she was going to end up keeping it. And it was kind of a punch to the gut when she actually burned it. So those moments, I think, are another thing that make the show quite special.
I
totally forgot about that.
Yeah, me too. That painter, that storyline.
Yeah, I do remember that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that storyline when she was the home health aide was... I didn't really know why she was there, but you're right. There was an emotional impact that landed better than some of the other things and places that they went and people they had to interact with, which was weird because I cannot tell you why she was there. I have no idea why she was in that house.
Right. He was some governmental employee.
Yeah, but what? They were usually a little more specific.
I don't remember, and they may have not even said and that's, for as good as those moments are, that's one of the challenges of the show, especially in the later seasons, of having to, as a viewer, almost comb through the different storylines of what matters and what doesn't, because that entire one ultimately probably didn't matter a ton to the overall story as much as I felt it impacted just on a personal level.
Right.
So it's like, what's more important?
Anything else you want to say about the Americans that we haven't already covered?
I don't think so.
Well, hearing none then, what I'd like to do is thank Samantha and Aubrey for joining me today to look back at the Americans. And because we've done such a thorough look back at the Americans, it's now time for the credits! Couch Potatoes Unite! Was produced by Back Pocket Productions, run by yours truly, the Chief Couch Potato, which is really another way of saying executively produced by me, Kylie Piette. My associate producers are Krista Pennington and Selene Rezmer. I edit this podcast, and our logo is by Rebecca Wallace. Our marketing graphic artist is Krista. Our theme song was written by Sarah Milbratz and sung by Sarah, Amy McDaniel, and Kelsey Rezmer. Kelsey played the keyboard, Ian McDonough played the bass, Christian Somerville played the guitar, and the whole kit and caboodle was engineered and produced by Kyle Aspinall and Christian. We hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please, if you like what you hear, take the time to rate us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, or Google Play, or wherever you find your podcasts. Give us stars, give us comments, give us reviews. Let us know how we're doing. Send us a message. We might just read it on the podcast. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, what we should keep, what we should toss. You know how it goes. And if you have suggestions on shows we might consider, contact us at our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, where we have a guest book, by email at couchpotatoesunitepodcast@gmail.com, or via our social media, Facebook, Twitter at CPU Podcast, and Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite. Though, of course, we add new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler all the time. We always have several more new episodes coming down the pike. Just listen to our intros. And if you miss old episodes or want to know in general what we cover, just find us. We are everywhere and searchable wherever you look for things on the internet. You can search for us, or you can subscribe at our website, our channels, our social media accounts. Stay up on our new events and episodes. Until the next time, The Americans is available to stream in its entirety at Amazon Prime. Since we've looked back while taking a first look at this series, if you have nominations for shows we should cover on our podcast, contact us via social media or our email. You can volunteer to be a panelist too. In the meantime, and until next time, until next episode, new episodes are published every Wednesday. Keep listening, keep watching, stay tuned. Bye-bye.
Bye.